Marital conflict. I was suspected of controlling and manipulating my wife, hurt and worried about the family's future. I've not tried to downplay my part. Lying is always wrong, and lies by omission are lies. Without a doubt, relative to the ECHO, TDO, custody hearing, wife had an episode spanning several days. I petitioned for the ECHO, it was granted. Then she was held on a TDO for inpatient treatment for 4 days, when she was released. With a diagnosis of bipolar, she stayed gone for a week or so, living with her sister-in-law. In that time, she managed to get an emergency hearing with the local judge for custody of our children. After hearing her side of it and her outrageous claims, the judge ruled in my favor, granting me sole custody with my wife being allowed supervised visits at my discretion. I asked her who she'd be comfortable supervising the visits, and she chose her mother. I never once denied her a chance to visit and imposed no restrictions or limits on the time or duration of those visits, after hearing my wife for 30 to 40 minutes. The only questions the judge had for me were whether or not I suspected drug use. My wife testified in court that she was going to earn $700K a year selling cars, quit her job where she'd recently received a very long-awaited promotion, and she was going to write a book and start an orphanage. She made a series of horrible financial decisions that put us thousands in debt that I allowed, because I thought it would make her happy. I have gone through her phone maybe 5 total times in 17 years. And 2 or 3 of those were incidental to something popping up, and me just scrolling a little ways up through a conversation. The number of times I have went digging is maybe 3 times. I went through the counselor messages because I wanted to better understand my wife's thoughts, so I could figure out how she wants to be loved. I suggested marriage counseling, and she wanted to go. She got mad one night and told me to cancel the next day's session. It was already a tight schedule, so I canceled and rescheduled for the following week. She went off on me and told me I didn't care about our marriage. She says things. Then, when I point out what she said, she'll literally tell me I didn't mean it like that. If I did, I'd have said it like this, with a slightly different emphasis. When I question what she means by something or express that I don't understand what she's wanting, she gets defensive, shuts down, and tells me it's not her job to communicate her feelings in a way I understand. Maybe I'm controlling, but I don't think so. Up until recently, I've made more money than my wife. She picked and purchased our first home while I was overseas without me even seeing it. I thought that showed great trust in her judgment. She's picked every vehicle we've bought, with the exception of 3 motorcycles I've owned, with almost no input for me. She has girls' nights when she wants, which have dwindled after children, and with new job responsibilities. I left the military for her. I decreased my hours at work when she complained that I worked too much overtime. I even DD for her when she wants to go to the friends' houses where she vents about our marital problems because I don't want her to feel stifled or controlled. She keeps friends who are gay and have openly admitted to having a crush on her, and has even went on private overnight beach trips with them. Usually I go with them, but once or twice they've went a day early. She went to Vegas on a work trip last year. She has her own credit cards, buys whatever she wants. And I'm halfway through building a house with my own hands that she helped me design. If it seems I've minimized, then I apologize. I've tried to be straightforward in my answers in the comments. Painting my wife in a bad light to get people to agree with me does me no favors, and certainly wouldn't save this marriage. Maybe I had an emotional affair? By my definition, it wasn't. I've never held the position that men and women can't be friends unless they're attracted to each other, but most people disagree. As for hiding the communication, I planned to bring it up. I just kept kicking the can down the road until it was a much bigger problem than it had to be. I should have been a man and either not responded to said woman or just told my wife about it. My wife can't point to a single inappropriate message in any of the messages. Her biggest complaint was the frequency, which was several conversations a week. And I stress, I do not sit on my phone at home, so it's not like I was ignoring my wife to invest time in another woman. Boo they. If the consensus is that's an emotional affair, then certainly I'll accept that the lying and the communication itself were equally bad. I'm no saint and don't pretend to be. Still, I wish my wife had been upfront in saying she wasn't okay with it instead of befriending this woman and her husband and children for another year, than just deciding that we were too close. And I think my willingness to stop as soon as she told me how she really felt should be worth something. My wife and I have 2 children, a 7-year-old daughter and a 13-month-old son. We both work a lot, and she is a good mother and would describe me as a good father. My wife found that I had become friends with a female that I'd trained and mentored without informing her. My phone stays unlocked, and our communications were not covert or hidden, and were almost exclusively email work and personal. Facebook a text. I just didn't volunteer that I was talking to this woman. We go to a mutual gym, so I'd see her sometimes in a public setting. And occasionally, we'd get caught up in shop talk, and I may linger over for a time. But never at times that my children were out of school, daycare, or my wife was off work. My wife, after finding out, tried to befriend this woman and her husband and invited them to our children's birthdays. etc. Ultimately, my wife began to think that the woman was interested in me romantically and wanted me to cut contact with her, which I resisted. During these conversations, I'd ask my wife if she thought I would cheat on her or leave her for this woman, and she said no. But that it could eventually happen, and that she just wanted me to be transparent and guarded. Finally, in one explosive episode, my wife told me that I'd probably had sex with this woman. I asked her if she felt that way, and she said yes. I immediately stopped talking to this woman. She texted me once or twice with random stuff, and then finally asked if I was purposefully ignoring her. I left her on read, and my wife replied a day later to her on her own phone that she had never been comfortable with the whole thing, and that she would prefer her not to reach out to me again. The other woman simply said she understood and would respect that decision. And that was the end of that. During this time, my wife and I began relationship counseling that I picked out, and she has been seeing via phone a regular therapist for almost a year now. On top of this, around the same time, my wife discovered that I'd started taking prescription TRT without telling her. I decided to start it because I felt my wife would use it to discredit my feelings on things. So I figured I'd wait a year and tell her so I could point out that she hadn't noticed previously. So 2 acts of deception on my part that I'm not super proud of. Before this year's events, our other major source of conflict came when my daughter was 9 months old. My wife was manic for 4 days, nearly fought her mother and best friend, and was ultimately involuntarily committed to an inpatient mental health hospital for several days, then discharged with outpatient services and a diagnosis of bipolar. During that period, she said horrible things, made awful financial decisions, and acted in a way that led every friend and family member who knew her to question her sanity. I obtained an echo for her after being instructed to by her physician, and then she was evaluated by independent evaluators and held for 4 days. When she got out, she was still fairly erratic and left me, threatening to take the children. She convinced a judge to have an emergency hearing, and after listening to my wife rant, the judge awarded me sole custody with supervised visitation at my discretion. After a few weeks of living with her sister, my wife decided to come home. For a few months after that, anytime I challenged her or set a boundary, it would lead to an explosive argument, and she was tell me she couldn't do this anymore and she'd leave. She'd stay gone a night, then come back. The last time she did that, I told her if she ever left again that she wouldn't be welcome back. I mention this period because I've recently realized that it led to me avoiding conflict with my wife out of fear of her leaving. My wife went from writing me unsolicited letters about how great I was to her and how spoiled she was to telling people I held her on a bed and she had to fight me off, that I punched a refrigerator and was the most controlling person alive in the span of 2 days. I'm 250 pounds and literally teach other men how to physically restrain other grown men for a living. And my wife weighs 105 pounds. I also have pictures of the refrigerator with a noticeable lack of dents. None of that really matters, but I mention it to say that I feel like she never really came home to me after this. She never apologized for any of her actions during that period, which didn't matter, but would have shown some regret for how it all played out. But more importantly, she never forgave me or tried to understand why I obtained the echo. Prior to the echo, my wife and I didn't air marital laundry out to people outside the relationship, aside from one mutual friend couple when we were both present. After the echo, my wife routinely told her friends about our arguments, but downplayed significantly her contributions when asked why she felt the need to do so. She said it was because before the echo, no one knew how she really felt, and that she wanted to make sure she had people on her side if it ever happened again. I only learned this when I was using her phone, and a message popped up from a friend, which led to me reading the whole thread, which I'm not proud of. In that thread, we'd had an argument the night before, and my wife threw a picture frame, breaking it and cutting her hand on the glass. She'd also poked me and slapped me and screamed in my face, calling me condescending, emotionless, and a number of other things. This was while she was pregnant with baby number 2. And when I asked why she had wanted a baby but was now talking about leaving, she replied that she didn't need me in her life to raise a baby. She spent like 5 paragraphs talking about how horribly I talked to her in the argument, and a single sentence mentioning cutting herself on the picture frame she broke in anger. Also, I should mention that I thought we were finally in a good place relationship-wise, so I agreed to have another child with her. But then everything went downhill after she got pregnant. As recently as a few weeks ago I learned she was talking about our relationship problems with a number of my friends' wives from work. And when I asked her why she felt the need to do that, she reiterated her reasoning from the echo. Which leads me to believe she never really forgave me for it. Last bit of information, she's also had a male therapist for a year, and in an effort to understand why she's acting the way she's acting recently, I went through her messages in a thread with her therapist. I found a message where he told her he would advise following through with leaving to show me that she's serious about it if my behavior continues. I feel it's inappropriate to give relationship advice as an individual therapist, but it reinforces the idea that she has painted a horrible picture of me. I've offered to sit down and discuss adjusting work hours so she doesn't feel like I work too much, and I had committed to relationship counseling with her, both prior to her getting an apartment. She told me last night that she believes this will show her what I'm willing to sacrifice to keep her in my life, and that it will make me stronger. My wife has now gotten an apartment and said she plans to move out for 3 months, and she's supposed to leave tomorrow. I know I violated some trust. I know I've tolerated abuse from her in the past. I've been yelled at and screamed at so loud neighbors could hear from outside the house. I've been assaulted by her, etc. Most of that was when we were younger. And I understand we both came from broken homes, so we have to kind of reference each other. But I can't see how a 3-month separation can fix anything. I feel like after the echo I couldn't set any boundaries with her because she'd leave. I feel like this will solidify in my mind that the relationship will never be equal, and that she's only doing it to assert control over me. I don't know if I've explained all of this properly, but I'm really just wondering if anyone thinks there's a chance that 3 months of separation can be a good thing. And if it's reasonable for a person to do something hurtful to their spouse with the intent of correcting behavior or testing their love.
My 25M family cut contact with me 5 years ago after a fight with my younger brother. Now they want me to come back, but I'm having doubts about it. My family pretty much cut all ties with me at the end of 2015. Things had been a bit turbulent for a while, but when I went over to my parents' house for Christmas in 2015, I got very drunk one night and got into an argument with my younger brother, which ended up turning physical. I was 19 at the time. He would have been 15, and he came out of it pretty badly. Without going into massive detail, he said something which struck a nerve. I won't say what because it's quite personal and not really relevant here, and I ended up injuring him quite badly. There was a question of potentially involving the police, but nothing ever happened in regards to that. In the end, they all just told me they wanted nothing to do with me anymore, which is fair enough. I was completely in the wrong and they were absolutely right to want to cut me off. I'm not complaining about that in the slightest. I had already moved out by that stage, so it wasn't a case of kicking me out. It was more just telling me to never come back again. I can't blame them for this at all, and would be surprised if you could either. This post isn't about me complaining about being cut off or pretending that I didn't deserve it, because I did, and I'm not trying to play the victim here. I genuinely regret what I did and have spent time trying to self-improve in the wake of it. It was quite difficult for me to come to terms with this for the first year or so afterwards. The only person my family had any contact with was my mom. We never really spoke in depth, just small updates, wishing each other happy birthday and things like that. Honestly though, after that first year, things have gotten so much better for me. I stopped drinking, which was the root of a lot of my problems. I got my head down and ended up doing very well at uni. I've now got a job that I love, and I've been with my girlfriend for the best part of 4 years, and things are absolutely great. To be brutally honest, I don't miss my family. My relationship with them has been great for a while before the fight, and as far as I was concerned, I didn't miss them and they didn't miss me. And being on a non-contact basis with all of them, apart from occasional contact with my mom, was for the better. However, over the last few months, my mom began messaging me more frequently and asking more personal questions about my life, my work, my relationship, etc. I thought it was just boredom on her part, but she maintained it for a while and began to introduce the idea of me coming back to visit her at some point, which I always shrugged off. She started to persist with it, and then yesterday, it all came to a head when she added me to a WhatsApp group chat with the rest of the family. I was then told how they had all come to a family decision that 5 years was enough, and my brother had found it in his heart to forgive me for what happened, and that they wanted me to come home at some point to catch up on lost time. These are all quotes from what they sent me. I didn't say much, I just said I wanted time to think. I'm quite torn on this now. Part of me feels like I'm obliged to go along with it. They cut contact with me because of my own actions, and if my brother's forgiven me and wants to re-establish contact with me, then it's my duty to do so. On the other hand, I feel like since contact was cut, my life improved a lot. My relationship with them had always been on a downward slope for a fair bit of time beforehand, and I just haven't found myself missing any of it. That's why I'm asking for advice. Would you say that I'm obliged to go and re-establish contact because it was my fault that contact was cut, or do you think it would be acceptable for me not to do so? I don't think OP's wrong for being hesitant about reapproaching his family. While it would be cool to see a family come back together, I do understand if OP wants to stay separated for now. It seems like he really does believe that his life is much better now. It's also a good thing that OP recognizes that the reason he cut off contact in the first place is his fault, and while I don't think he holds any obligation to automatically go back because of that, it is a good sign that he has improved since he last saw them. Update. I wasn't initially planning on doing an update for that post, but the amount of responses I got from it were absolutely unprecedented, so I decided it was right of me to do one. I didn't respond to every single comment, but I did read all of them. I greatly appreciate everyone's input, whether it was positive or negative, or telling me to go back or cut contact completely. It was really good to get different takes on the situation because at the time it was a lot to take in, and still is in a way. I'll start off by saying soon after the post was written, I phoned my brother. We talked for a few minutes about how things were going, and then I apologized to him for what happened back in 2015. He didn't specifically say he forgave me, but was amicable and said he appreciated me doing it. I'm glad I did it. I know 5.5 years is a long time to have gone without doing it, but that was the first vocal conversation I'd had with him since the family cut contact. He told me that the whole incident hadn't left him with any lasting mental or physical damage, and while I have no way of knowing whether that's completely true, I was glad to hear it. I don't want to make it about myself, but I also feel like a bit of the weight lifted off my shoulders. In terms of the actual resumption of contact, it won't be happening for now. After a few days of talking to the family as a collective in the group chat, which I have now left, as well as some individual conversations with the different members, I told them I was happy to increase contact with them through messaging. But as things stand, I don't think resuming face-to-face contact would be right, and that I wasn't going to do it. As I stated in the initial post, I was already having severe doubts about it, and the conversations I had with them pretty much made up my mind for me. I'll list a few examples of it here. Much of the discussion I had with family was done through a group chat in which I, 25M, was added to by my mom, 45F. This group chat also contained my dad, 54M, and my two brothers, 20M and 14M. The group chat was titled Reunion, so it was pretty obvious what their intentions were. The initial language used by them when I was added bothered me. I gave some examples of it in the original post, things like my mom saying my brother had found it in his heart to forgive me, and them coming to a family decision that 5 years was enough. It made it seem like there was no chance of it being a normal family relationship at all, and that I would always be indebted and subservient to them in some form for that. As I said, I had no issue with being cut off and felt they were pretty justified in doing so, but that doesn't mean I would be prepared to come back and be in a constant state of owing one, and likely being made to feel pressure to do things for them because they were oh so kind to find it in their hearts to let me back. This sort of language continued throughout me being in that group chat. Some more examples were being told that I had lots of work to do if we wanted to be a normal relationship. Notice that they didn't say we, and was also compared to the prodigal son multiple times by my very religious parents, which made me think they were doing it for their own spiritual reasons rather than actually being interested in having me back as a part of the family. The final nail in the coffin was when I specifically expressed doubts about it. My dad said, "After all you did to us as a family, we've decided to let you back in," and then pretty much went on to tell me that I should be biting their hands off for a chance to make amends, and that I was ungrateful for not doing so. I told them I was backing out of it pretty soon after that. A few of the replies to my original post asked if any of them needed an organ. I initially brushed this off as a joke, but after some of the conversations I had, I genuinely think it's possible that it's true. My girlfriend, 24F, is also a big reason why I was initially having doubts, and a couple of things that were said by my dad completely reinforced these. I 100% know that he would dislike her, not through any fault of her own, but mainly because he has some very old-fashioned views on women, and he's also quite racist. She is only half white, and when I was younger, my dad made it pretty clear that he didn't want me to date outside of my race. In the group chat, he described her as my exotic girlfriend. It made a couple of very stereotypical assumptions on her based on her race, which made it pretty clear to me that he still found it wrong and abnormal of me to be with a girl who isn't completely white. If I resumed a somewhat normal father-son relationship with him, I'm almost certain he'd try to interfere in some way. It would at the very least encourage me to end things with her. It's not like I've only been seeing her for a month either. We've been together for almost 4 years and have discussed marriage, so she absolutely takes priority over the family. Those are the main reasons behind me choosing not to go down the route of face-to-face contact with the family. There are a few other things too, such as the fact that they seem awfully interested in grandchildren who didn't even exist, and also that I suspected that it was all my mom's doing and the rest of the family weren't that interested. I'm fairly sure she was feeding the others lines. My 14-year-old brother was typing an awful lot like my 45-year-old mom. Let's put it that way. With all these factors combined and my initial doubts about it, made my mind up that I wasn't going to resume face-to-face contact. I messaged them telling them that while I did appreciate them trying to get me to do so, I just had too many doubts about it to go and start meeting with them face-to-face or going to their house. I did say that they all had my number now and were free to text me at any point if they wanted to talk, and then left the group chat. I know they've all read it because they've all been online since I sent it, but I haven't had a single message from any of them. To be honest, I'm not sure if I ever will, and yet, I can't really say that I feel sad about it. I'm glad I've apologized to my brother, and if that's the end of all contact with them, then so be it. It is what it is. My mom was contacting me every day in the months leading up to her deciding I should start seeing the family again. Now it's beginning to seem to me that she was doing so because she wanted me to return to them on my hands and knees, groveling and begging for forgiveness. Things certainly began to turn a bit sour when it came clear that I wasn't going to do that. Perhaps she sees it as the final betrayal and wants nothing more to do with me now. At the end of the day, I'm never going to pretend that they were for a second wrong for cutting contact with me. They did it to protect their 15-year-old son, and I completely understand it. Ultimately, though, I grew up, ended my addiction, and built a life for myself off the back of it without them involved in my life. It's very likely that they still had this image of the 19-year-old who turned completely white when he was told they want nothing more to do with him. But that really isn't me anymore. When they initially kicked me out, I felt like I needed them, even though we didn't have the greatest relationship. 5 years on from that, I certainly don't think I do anymore. I apologize to anyone who read the initial post and wanted me to go see them in person again, but this is just how things have turned out. Once again, thank you to everyone for offering support and advice, and I hope that anyone reading this who has their own issues with family and estrangement is able to navigate them and build a relationship back if they so wish. I think OP absolutely made the right choice here. In just about any other circumstance, I would probably argue for meeting with their family, but in this case, it seems like it would do much more harm than good. Not to mention, if OP's father is racist, it's probably better not to interact with him whatsoever. OP was certainly wrong before when he attacked his brother, but now, after all is said and done, I think he's the only one of them that's in the right. OP made amends to the best of his abilities and is a changed person. I really do hope OP gets his own family that treats him properly. My stepdaughter wants her real dad to give her away. My stepdaughter will be getting married on August 3rd. The wedding planning has consumed most of her and her mother's life. I say her mother because we aren't married, though we've lived together for 10 years, for the past 6 months. My stepdaughter graduated last December from university. I paid for her to go to college, though it was a state school. I still ran $40K. She does not have a job and has been living with us for the duration of her college career and since her graduation. I also bought her a car to get back and forth from school when she finished high school. From time to time, her deadbeat father would pop into her life and she would fawn all over him, although he has not contributed a cent to her education or paid any child support. Though that is my girlfriend's fault, as child support was not part of the arrangement. She still loves him and wants him in her life. He stays long enough to break her heart by skipping town and breaking some promise that he made her. The wedding venue holds 250 people max. I gave them a list of 20 people that I wanted invited. You know, since I was paying for everything. They told me that was no problem and they'd take care of it. So I let these people know they'd be getting an invite and they should save the date. Saturday, I saw one of my friends on this list at the golf course and asked if he was coming. He told me that he wasn't invited. He told me that he got an announcement, but not an invitation. He had it in his back seat, along with probably 6 months of mail, and showed it to me. Sure enough, it was just an announcement, and my name was nowhere on it. It was her dad's name, and her mom's name, and not mine. This led to a pretty big fight with my GF, as I found out that none of my list of 20 made the cut for the final guest list because 250 people is very tight. I was pissed, but not a hell of a lot I could do because the important people in my life had already been offended. My GF said, if some people didn't RSVP, yes, I might be able to get a couple people in. But that is an ultimate slap in the face in my opinion, so I was boiling on Saturday. Yesterday, we had a Sunday dinner with a future in-laws family and us and a surprise guest, the real dad. At this little dinner, my stepdaughter announced that her real dad was going to be able to make it to her wedding, and that now he'd be able to give her away. This was greeted with a chorus of, oh, how great, and how wonderfuls. I don't think I've ever felt so angry and so disrespected. I was shaking. I took a few seconds to gather my composure because I honestly wasn't sure if I would cry or start throwing punches or both. Once I was sure I'd be able to speak, I got up from my chair and said I'd like to make a toast. I can't exactly remember what I said, but it was the gist of this. I'd like to make a toast. The sound of spoons against my glasses ringing in my ears. It's been my great pleasure to be a part of this family for the past 10 years. Aw, how sweet. At this point in my life, I feel I owe a debt of gratitude to the bride and groom, because they have opened my eyes to something very important. Confident smiles exchanged. They have showed me that my position in this family is not what I once thought it was, and now a glimmer of confusion and shock begins to spread across the faces in the room. Though I once thought of myself as the patriarch or godfather of the family, commanding great respect and sought out for help in times of need, it seems that instead I hold the position of an ATM, good for a stream of money but not much else, as I have been replaced as host, both on the invitations and in the ceremony. I am resigning my financial duties as host to my successor, Real Dad, so cheers to the happy couple and the path they have chosen. I finish my drink. You can all let yourselves out. Is this selfish? I'm supposed to shell out 40 to 50 grand for a wedding that I can't invite anyone to? That I'm not a part of? I'm so done with this. I'm done with my stepdaughter. I'm done with my GF. I transferred the money out of our joint account last night. She has not had a job since she moved in with me. This morning I called all the vendors I had written checks to for deposits to refund my money. At present, it looks like I'll lose around $1,500 for the venue, but the other vendors have been great about refunding. I hate to say it, but I seriously doubt that OP was that well spoken in that moment. It sounded like he was absolutely fuming and barely had control over his own emotions at the time, so I doubt he'd be able to word something that well. But that's not why we're here. This situation is still very unfair. I do think it's pretty ridiculous how OP's GF and stepdaughter expect him to pay all this money while not being able to really have any concessions of his own. And while I do understand that it is not OP's wedding and rather his stepdaughter's, I do believe he's owed at least a little gratitude for funding the entire wedding. Update 1. The immediate aftermath was tantrum and people sitting there mumbling while not actually saying anything to me, but to each other. After much yelling with GF about me being selfish, I spent the night in my home office and no one knocked on my door. Not once. Today's aftermath is kind of depressing for me. GF bought me bride's wedding planner to to show me how much work I was running. I thumbed through it, found a page on the music section for father/daughter dances. All of the songs were catered to real dad's taste. So I thought they were just being disrespectful, but now I feel like they never really cared at all, especially since the menu included 2 ingredients I'm allergic to. That actually made me laugh. Either way, I'm glad to be done. Returned the planner and asked her when she and the bride could move out. Also, I never promised to pay for the wedding. I offered them the use of my home when they were sure it was going to be small, but other than that, all I've heard now is it's the bride's family that should pay. So let it be the bride's family then, aka not me. I do think this is another one of those situations where it is in OP's best interest to just get out. Final update. Girlfriend and bride are now moved out. They are moving in with the groom. It was very hard not to be petty with some of the belongings they took with them, but it's done. And I switched out the locks and now it's time for a brew. I can't believe how popular this story got, but I feel good to be given support by so many. When I find out what happens with the wedding, I will let you know, but I can't guarantee that I will put in the effort to find out. From what I've heard, they are trying to scale things back and get his parents to help out. GF burned bridges when I found out she tried to write herself a check on our joint account the day after the unpleasantness. By then I had already moved my money, so I guess I'm a bigger jerk than her, but I could feel it coming. That's all, thanks. I think scaling things back is probably a bit of an understatement. Suddenly, the financial responsibility falls on someone else's shoulders, so I don't think that anybody else is going to cover it just as much as OP did, especially on such short notice. Also, I hope that all of the money that OP moved out of the joint account was actually his. Otherwise, that's going to have some really bad legal repercussions down the line. I got a fridge lockbox and it's destroying my relationship. Some background. BF 28M and I 25F have been together 5 years, lived together 3. Our relationship was great, truly. We have a joint account we contribute to monthly to handle our expenses, rent, groceries, etc. Everything else is split. BF is 6'3", 200 pounds and works out daily. He eats a lot to keep up with his caloric intake, which is fine, except for this one issue. We buy snacks and he always eats my half before I can even get to it. Normal food and ingredients he's fine with, but if it's quickly accessible, I never get any. We argue, he apologizes, rinse and repeat. This is literally the only bad thing he's done. Seriously, in all other aspects of our relationship, he's respectful and considerate. Snacks are when all bets are off. Anyways, last week I lost it after he finished an expensive cheese we had gotten that I was really looking forward to eating. It was all gone after an hour. I lost my mind. I didn't speak to him for a day and ended up ordering a fridge lockbox. After our next snack run a couple of days later, I divided each snack in half and locked mine in the lockbox. From his reaction, you'd think I was murdering puppies. He said it was disrespectful and controlling, and how dare I keep food that he paid for from him. When I reminded him my money went to it too, he screamed that he didn't care and then left. He slammed the door so hard a picture fell off the wall and broke. He didn't come back until the next day, but that was the change for work and leave immediately. He didn't come home late and went straight to the guest room. 4 days of this. I broke last night and asked him to please talk about it, and he said he had nothing to say to me until I got rid of the lockbox. Honestly, I'm appalled at this reaction. I'm genuinely worried he might be on drugs or having a mental break or something. This is the most irrationally I've ever seen a grown man react. He's ignored me only to randomly ask if I've gotten rid of the lockbox. I am not getting rid of the lockbox. We're supposed to renew our lease next week. I'm considering cutting my losses and just leaving. Is this relationship even worth salvaging? Is there anything I can do to solve this? He is refusing to communicate unless I get rid of the lockbox, which is not happening. How stupid does OP's BF have to be to ruin an entire relationship over some food? It's really not that big of a deal. I think it's perfectly understandable that OP wants to enjoy some of her own snacks. Plus, it's not even like she's hoarding all of them. She's splitting them evenly. It's like OP said, she contributes to the food as well, so she should have her share. Update. Hey guys, I don't know if anyone wanted an update, but here it is. A lot happened. Boyfriend kept staying out late and refusing to talk. So I tried to talk to my boyfriend about the lockbox again, and I mentioned that I didn't think the lockbox was a real issue, but he was a brick wall, insisted that it's abusive and controlling to deny him food. I kept pushing, asking if he was on drugs or cheating. I said him flipping out over something so small and staying out at all hours was suspicious as hell. I said that I thought he was using a lockbox as an excuse to be out of the house doing something bad. Me saying that unleashed an hours-long screaming tantrum that ultimately resulted him in throwing my MacBook against the wall and shattering it. Honestly, I really thought he was going to hurt me. So yeah, called my dad, who called the cops. I don't want to get too far into the legality of it, but I'm pressing charges for destruction of property. It was a $2,500 laptop. Dad and my godfather moved me out yesterday, and I'm now looking for a new place. I don't have a lot except for clothes and a couple of kitchen appliances. I left the lockbox, but took my snacks with me, because screw him. I left it locked too. XBF has been spamming me. I'd block him, but it feels like I need this evidence in case his behavior escalates. I texted him the first night that we're done, took our photos down, everything. He began ranting at me. Some gems, raging about how I still didn't get rid of the lockbox, asking for stuff he gifted me back, telling me I owe him money and rent for his new place, that I owe him a car. I have no idea why he would say this. I've never even driven his current car. That brand new MacBook was old and worthless, and he wouldn't pay for a new one. I bought it last year brand new. After about an hour, I guess he realized that we were actually broken up and couldn't complain at me anymore. Then came the paragraphs about how he was going to marry me. He loves me. He wants to be better for me, that I can keep the gifts and he'll buy me a better MacBook. He freaked out over seeing I took pictures down from SM. He then started sending me screenshots of his Google searches of engagement rings and telling me to pick one. He also sent a couple voice messages of him just sobbing. Any respect I had for him as a person is just completely gone. I want nothing to do with this man. I don't care if he's having a breakdown or something. He's not my problem. I screenshotted his messages and forwarded them to his mother. She can deal with her son. That's the most I'll ever do for him again. As for me, I'll be okay. I have some savings, so tanking a full-on rent for a place as well as a deposit and fees won't be too much. It has been a weird week. I feel like I should be sad, but like I said, I lost all respect and don't feel anything but disdain for him. My parents have been buying me my favorite comfort snacks and being super supportive. They're gently pushing for therapy, and I think it's probably a good idea. I'll start my search once I'm settled in a new place. Good on OP for getting out of there. That ex was completely crazy. Getting that worked up just over a little bit of food is definitely a huge red flag. Nobody should ever date anybody who gets violent over small things like that.